Hi, YouTube followers and listeners. I got this flaring tool here from Harbor Freight. Actually, this one I think is from Advanced Auto. So the first thing I want to cover is if you're working on brakes and there's tubing that I'm trying to practice flaring here, and I want to cut off this end to make it basically usable for another flare. I want to cut this flare off and have the tubing in the raw state as you would get from a tubing roll. So to do that, you put the tubing in this little tubing cutter that comes with your flaring kit. And you get the tubing to sit in here. This is 3/16 tubing, which is destined for a Mercedes ML500. So you simply tighten this up a bit until the tubing is just resting on that wheel. And now we have the wheel resting on the tubing, and it's on these two rollers here, as you can see the rollers. So you simply tighten this up a little bit, and you roll this around a couple of times. You tighten again and roll it. You tighten again and roll it. And what's happening is I guess this is a diamond cutting wheel. It's cutting into the steel tubing. And if you do this enough, you don't want to do it too fast and ruin your blade, but you keep tightening it bit by bit. Tighten it again, bit by bit. You can see I'm not turning it much, just a tiny bit. And eventually, this will cut the brake line, and you'll be able to practice another flare or do it for real. And looks like it's getting ready to fall off, and there, it fell off. And so this little piece has been cut off. The next thing you do is you open your tool up, and there's like a little deburring knife in here. This knife is not sharp, but it's a hazard. So you want to put that into here, and you see how the tubing has material in the middle. You want to open it up. So this tool will help you deburr it a bit. And this thing always seems like you're going to slice your finger off with it. It's not really sharp, but it's scary. Okay, now I've run it through here a few times. And now you can see the tubing has been cut professionally. It's cut nice and round, and there's no burring. So we're probably ready now to try to get this tubing to be flared. And doing a double flare, as I found from watching YouTube people, is a two-step process. So I'm going to get the 3/16 inch first step of the flare, and kind people on YouTube have shown me how to do this, so I'm just showing you how I've learned to do it. And I've only done like 2 or 3 flares now in the hotel room. It's not really what I want to do on a Thursday night, but I have to do this stuff on the weekend, have these flares figured out. So this is my homework. So what people have said is you take this piece, which will plug into here to flare it, and I'm an IT person by trade, so I'm mechanical, but this is not my profession. But it might be $1,000 or more to do brake lines on an old 2005 Mercedes ML500. I don't want to pay thousands of dollars. I paid $500 for the whole car, so I don't want to be putting money into it. Anyway, if you see how this large diameter, as the fellow talked about, that width there, you want to put that down against your brake line and have the brake line stick up only the width of this tool. So I'm going to loosen up this flaring tool, and you want to get the brake line here tight. So I'm loosening it up, and I'm going to bring it down a bit. And right now I can see the brake line is bent, so that's bad. I would like to get it, you want to have it straight, so unfortunately I've been doing something and I can't bend it on my own. It's too tricky. Anyway, let's take it down. And you want to have it this high. You want to have it this diameter high. So take it down a little more. And now you can see that the height of the brake line is the same as this height of this little die thing here. And you can see it says 3/16 on that die. Okay, so now check it again. It looks a little high. I'm going to push this down a little more. There. And now we'll check it again. Perfect. So the brake line and the die are evenly matched. So now I will try and tighten this down symmetrical. A little bit there. A little bit here. You really want to get this thing super tight because you don't want the brake line slipping. You can see it has little jaws for gripping the brake line. And I guess they have hydraulic tools to do this stuff. This is like the poor man's way of flairing a brake line. So I'm really going to try and tighten this thing down here a bit. Wow. And okay, so that's the best I can make it. So now the first step is taking this little flairing tool. Make sure it matches your brake line. This says 3/16 on it. The brake line is 3/16. You insert the little tool into the brake line hole where the fluid travels through. And then you want to get this little gadget which has this compressing device on it, and that will fit nicely into the same little detent on the die. So now, from watching this fellow do this professionally on YouTube, he was saying you want to keep this thing tilted and cocked so that it won't be flopping around. You don't want this thing to flop around when you move it. You want to really hold it in the direction of the turn, which is clockwise, and keep it steady. So now you can see how it's lined up on there, and make sure it's tight. It is tight. And the next thing you do is to start your first flare, and for that I need a wrench. Let me get the wrench here. So I'm using a crescent wrench or a pair of slip pliers to add leverage to this. Okay, so now we make sure this thing is cocked to an angle. So I'm going to hold it like this in my hand so that I'm putting some tension on this device in a clockwise fashion. And now I'm going to use these pliers, these crescent wrench here on top, and turn this thing clockwise, and I want to take this thing all the way down to the bottom. So this little silver die should bottom out. This is turning pretty easy, so I'm hoping that it actually worked and didn't fail. Let's take a look at what happened here. Did it work? That thing fell on the floor. Ow. The brake line, I can see here where it moves, so that's not good. I'm going to start it over. You can start this thing over. This is actually a lot harder than I thought it would be. It's not too easy at all. And you probably get only so many tries with this tool. I'm on 3/16 here, so that's the smallest there is. Maybe we'll try to tighten this thing more symmetrical. So I'm going to try and line it up again by bringing the brake line up, getting it lined up with this tool here. That's the right height now, and we'll try and tighten it a little better symmetrically. Maybe that was my mistake because it didn't really tighten very well. The guy on YouTube was putting this thing in a vise, and that seemed to be the best way to do it. I don't know if I can even make it tight enough with my hands. I suppose I could be smart and use this wrench to do it like this. Let's see if that'll work. Sometimes you can do this. Okay, yeah, that works great. So you don't want to break your tool, but maybe you can use a crescent wrench to get it tighter. Oh, see, I've broken the tool. See how I bent it? So you don't want to do this. Okay, well, with a broken tool now, let's take this and again compress it. And this is our first flare again. I do have some pre-made brake line, and maybe I'll end up using that. This seems very difficult for me to master. Okay, so I'm trying this again, and the whole problem is this tubing will slip through here when I tighten it. So this is the first flare for a two-step process. Let's see what happens this time. Making it nice and tight. So I'm looking for this to bottom out down here. It hasn't bottomed out yet. There, it looks like it's at the bottom now. So now I'm going to pick this thing back up. Take that off. And there's our tubing. So now the next step is to simply use this without anything attached to it and flare it again. So let's try that. Hold this thing down, and I'm gonna take that thing to the bottom. The expert on YouTube was saying don't really mash it in too hard, just take it down easy. So I'm not gonna bottom this thing out. I'm just gonna go a few turns here, and it looks like it's already sort of flared here now. Okay, that's enough, I think. Let's take a look and see what happened. Let's see how our flare turned out. Okay, so there's the flare. It doesn't look very robust. I almost want to pick it up a little bit and flare it some more. But if the flare will encompass this groove in here, actually it's not bad. It's not bad. I probably want to flare it a bit more. It looks like it's just not down enough, so let's give it one more crank here. They were saying don't crank it too hard because it makes it too thin, so you want to keep some meat on the bones here on this flare. So let's just crank it a little more. See how it turns out. Maybe a quarter turn or something. Well, let's do a little more. Okay, it's definitely bottomed out now. So I felt like it tighter. So let's get this part off, this flare making part off, and take a look now at the flare. And the real reference will be to look at the flare that the factory folks are putting on the pre-made pipe. So we'll do that in a minute here once I get this thing out of here. Wow, it's tight. Of course I used pliers to tighten this thing, which wasn't real smart. I should probably put some WD-40 on here to make this easier to turn so it will tighten better. A lot of friction on threads that aren't lubricated. Okay, so that flare does not look too good at all. The ones I did before were a lot better. So this flare looks premature, and the one they did before looks better. Let's take a look at the factory stuff. So here's tubing that I have bought that's already flared. And if you compare what I did, this is the European, the European flare. So if you look at what I did to what they did, I don't think I'm going to cut the mustard at all. So their tubing has a much more robust flare on it than mine. Mine is thin. So what I think I need to do is try this thing with a higher stance. So instead of